section 7.3, one of the things you need to do is be able to graph tangent, cotangent, and sine functions that have a different period and amplitude than the parent graph. So if you notice here, this is 2 periods graph for f of t is equal to tangent of t. And so this would be a parent graph, and our task is to graph g of t equal to tangent of quantity 4t. So to do that, all we really need to do is sort of duplicate what the graph looks like for the parent function. So we're just going to get a copy of that. And there are no horizontal or vertical transformations in this case. So we can go from this graph. Now what's going to change here, and when you're doing tangent, what's going to change in this case is your period is changing. You know that your period for tangent is normally pi. But in this case, we've got tangent of 4t, so to find the period in this case, we're going to take that pi and divide it by 4. So that means that all of these values, our asymptote values and our x-intercepts are going to change. And so they're also going to change by dividing each of them by 4. So what we need to do is, for this one, for example, we have negative pi over 2. So we have our pi over 2. And then just like we did when we were trying to figure out our period, we divided by 4. We're going to divide it by 4, or multiply by 1/4, giving me pi over 8. So I have pi over 8, and that's negative pi over 8. So now instead of having, enlarge this a little more. Now, instead of having an asymptote at negative pi over 2, we have an asymptote at negative pi over 8. Okay, and then that also changes the other asymptote to positive pi over 8. So this one is positive pi over 8. And that's also going to change the rest of these. In this case, you just have pi, and like I said before, we divided by 4, so we're going to divide that by pi over 4, so we know we have an x-intercept at pi over 4. And then this 3 pi over 2 also, this asymptote is going to change. We're going to take our 3 pi over 2, and we're going to divide it by 4. And in this case, we get 3 pi over 8. So there we have an asymptote at 3 pi over 8. And that gives us the graph of 2 complete cycles of tangent of the quantity 4t. Okay, now let's go and look at cosine. So with cosine, we have a parent graph of 2 full cycles of cosine of t. And for this one, it differs from sine. And this is, actually, we need to flip this here. This is a transformation, so we're going to flip this. We have a lot of things I need to ungroup. Okay, here we go. Okay. Now we have the graph that we're looking for here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so now we have the parent graph of, we have cosine of t, and we're looking to graph 5 times the cosine of the quantity x divided by 4. In this case, for cosine, the period and the amplitude will change. So what we can do in this case is we can just take the parent graph again like we did in the last case. And the easiest thing to do here, I'm going to enlarge it, and the easiest thing to do is to change your amplitude. So the first thing we do is we know that our maximum is no longer 1 and -1 because we have this 5 here. Then our maximum is 5 and -5. Now it's a little more difficult to go through and deal with your period. So we know that for this, the parent graph has a period of 2 pi, so we're going to take that 2 pi and divide by 1/4. And that's because of this 4 here. And when we do that, we get a period of 8 pi. Meaning that if I go from peak here to peak here, then this should now not be at 2 pi, but at 8 pi. So I'm going to change that in blue, just so I know that that one has been changed. So this one's at 8 pi. Now everything that's in green, all of my increments that are in green, still need to be changed. And what we do for each of those, similar to what we did with the tangent, is we go through and we multiply all of them by 4. When we go through and multiply each of them by 4, then that's going to change this now to 2 pi. And this here is now 4 pi. This is now going to be 6 pi. And you notice you're going up 2 pi at the time, 8 pi. And so now, by this time, you should have figured out the pattern. So this would be 10 pi, 12 pi, and this, not 7 over 2 pi, should be 14 pi. And then we still have this one, and then that's going to be -2 pi. So using that, you would want a nicer version of that, but that's how you would change the increments on your x-axis so that you do have the graph of this cosine.